Hey, I'm Barbara O'Neill, and let me ask you, if you're over 50 and struggling with chronic bloating, what if I told you it's not just discomfort but a warning sign from your gut? Most people overlook this, masking symptoms instead of addressing the root cause. Today, I'll share my proven gut reset plan, a natural way to eliminate bloating and restore your digestive health. And as a special thank you for joining me today, we're giving away 100 free copies of my best-selling book to subscribers. So, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment about why you want to win my best-selling book.
We live in a body with an incredible inbuilt ability to heal. And I'm sure we've all had breaks. I'm sure we've all had scrapes. I'm sure we've all had cuts, and they've healed. And look, this hand, it's healed. It all works now. It heals. And that same healing process is all through the body, no matter what the problem is. And another thing I love about the book, The Ministry of Healing, she gives a formula of what to do when someone's sick. She said, in case of sickness, cause should be ascertained. How do you find the cause? You look at the history. My husband's very black and white. If ever he's sick, he looks at the last 24 hours. Got that? What's happened? Because Proverbs 26 verse 2 states that the curse causeless shall not come. In other words, no problem happens without a cause. So ascertain the cause, unhealthful conditions change, wrong habits corrected, then nature is to be assisted in her efforts to expel impurities and re-establish right conditions back in the system. So simple. I love that formula. What we're going to be talking about tonight specifically is the gut. We're going to go on a journey through our gastrointestinal tract. It's a fascinating journey and a misunderstood journey. And I love the Proverbs 14 verse 6, where the Bible says, knowledge is easy to him that understands. When you understand the gastrointestinal tract, you automatically have the knowledge on how to treat it. And we begin with the mouth. The mouth. That's the first organ. We don't think of the mouth as an organ. But this gastrointestinal tract is a hollow tube. It's considered an external environment. We know that the skin is an external environment. Anything that touches the skin isn't part of us till it gets through to the blood. Same with the gastrointestinal tract. Anything that goes into the gastrointestinal tract is not part of you or me till it gets broken down into tiny little substances that are absorbed into the blood. In our first lecture tomorrow, we're going to be looking at diabetes, and I'm going to show you what happens once the nutrients get into the blood. But tonight, we're going to have a look at that amazing, even astonishing process of what changes what's on our plate to microscopic little substances that get into the blood. So let's begin with the mouth. And the mouth is where digestion begins. And a lot of people don't realise that digestion begins in the mouth. And the pH, or the acid-alkaline balance in the mouth, is alkaline. And there are two enzymes that are released in the mouth that start the digestion of certain foods. One enzyme is lingual lipase. Lingual lipase is an enzyme that's released from the sublingual glands, and lingual lipase, it only breaks down one food, and that food is saturated fat. Saturated fat is unique in that the breakdown begins in the mouth. As you will see as we go down our gastrointestinal tract, all the other fats, their breakdown happens way down under the action of bile from the liver and pancreatic lipase. But saturated fat is unique in that the breakdown begins in the mouth. So what's a saturated fat? A saturated fat is butter, a saturated fat is coconut oil, palm oil, shea butter. In macadamias, there's a little bit of saturated fat. So in a lot of nuts, there's a small amount of saturated fat. Those fats are unique in that the breakdown begins in the mouth. A lot of people have shied away from the saturated fat because we've been told that saturated fat causes heart disease. Is that right? Well, tomorrow, the second lecture, we're going to look at the heart, and I will show you that this is actually not the case.
Here's a revelation. Saturated fats, like butter and coconut oil, are not the enemy. They're part of the solution to chronic bloating. Did you know the digestion of saturated fats starts right in your mouth? This unique trait aids in efficient digestion, but we've been misled to fear them. Meanwhile, cultures like the South Pacific Islanders thrived on these fats without heart disease or digestive issues. What's really ruining your gut? Processed foods, sugars and artificial oils wreak havoc on digestion. Fix the root cause, nourish your body naturally, and watch your bloating disappear, because healing starts with real food, not fear.
Every different fibre feeds a different probiotic. Did you know that 10 different types of apple will produce 10 different types of fibre, which will feed 10 different types of microorganisms? Count your fibre selection at each meal. We should be having at least 7 different types of fibre every meal. So in my breakfast this morning I had apple, that's one type. I had grapefruit, another type. I had almonds, that's another type. I had chia seed, another type. I had Brazil nuts, wow, that's 5 different types. I had avocado, that's another one. I had some crackers, wow, I easily got my 7. Count them every meal. How many different types of fibre you are getting. In my series that I did in Andalusia, it was mostly a homeschool families. It was out in a big tent. And I was teaching them about their prebiotics, their fibre. So I said one morning, okay, how many different types of fibre do you have for breakfast? And this little boy jumped up and said, 26. I said, what? I said to his father, 26? And his father went, he's having as many different types as possible. All those different types of fibre feed different microorganisms in our gastrointestinal tract. Fascinating. So that's how you can rebuild your gut flora. By, yes, probiotic foods, but also by looking at the selection of fibre that you have every meal. Let me give you a bit of historical evidence. The South Pacific Islanders, they've been eating saturated fat for centuries. Centuries. And when Captain Cook landed on those islands, no one was having strokes or heart disease. And if saturated fat did cause strokes and heart disease, wouldn't they be dying like flies? But it actually wasn't the case. So the enzyme that breaks down the saturated fat is called lingual lipase. Lingual because it's released from the sublingual glands under the tongue, and lipase is the enzyme that's the fat breaker. So this is one food where the breakdown begins in the mouth. The other is starch. Often starch is called today carbohydrates. So starch would include all your grains, so pastas, breads, cereals, all our grains. They break down in the mouth under the action of a sublingual, but also released not from the sublingual glands, but glands near that, and it releases salivary amylase. And that salivary amylase is called ptyalin. And ptyalin is the salivary amylase that breaks down starch. And that salivary amylase is not in the mouth in large amounts until the molars are through.
Did you know your chronic bloating might stem from your fibre choices or lack thereof? Here's the truth. Every type of fibre feeds a unique probiotic. That means diversity is critical, yet most people eat the same boring fibres daily. Each feeds a different gut microorganism, supporting digestion and reducing bloating. And guess what? That little boy with 26 fibres in his meal, his gut health is probably leagues ahead of yours.
But what I'd like to do now is I want to show you what happens in what we call the grand finale of digestion. This is the small intestine. The small intestine is lined with villi, looking like little fingers actually. And that villi has a blood capillary network all the way through it. So I'm going to, hopefully this will work. I'm just getting to know this. Yes, we've got blood. There's the blood capillary network that is all through the little capillaries. Now remember I said to you that anything that goes into our gastrointestinal tract is not part of you or me until it gets broken down to tiny particles. Then it becomes part of you and me when it gets absorbed into the blood. But lining, no, that didn't work. We're up here, green, this should work. Yes, I'm just getting used to my electronic whiteboard that is actually a blackboard. Lining the villi is a thick turf wall, and that thick turf wall is made of Lactobacillus acidophilus and bifidus bacterium, called our microbiome. And when we were in our mother's utero, our gut was sterile, no bacteria there. But when we were born, we were literally showered with our mother's microorganisms. And those microorganisms, Lactobacillus acidophilus, bifidus bacterium, they're the two permanent ones, and from them all the thousands of others are made. And these microorganisms are responsible for the final breakdown of our food. But didn't the breakdown happen with our enzymes? It certainly did. But these microorganisms, they're responsible for the release of our B vitamins. These microorganisms are responsible for the production of melatonin. And as we'll find out later in the week, melatonin is an important hormone that helps us sleep at night. These microorganisms are also important in the production of glutathione. And glutathione is a very potent antioxidant, called the most potent antioxidant. These microorganisms are also responsible for the absorption of the nutrients out of our gut and into our blood. These microorganisms are also important for the nourishment of the cells that line the gastrointestinal tract. These microorganisms play another role. They protect the blood against any harmful pathogens that may be in the gut. You might have heard the quote of Hippocrates, called the father of medicine. He said, "All disease begins in the gut." Because these microorganisms, they play an integral role, yes, in the protection of our blood, but also in that final breakdown, but also in the absorption. It is said in an assessment of Alzheimer's that many Alzheimer patients are lacking B vitamins. Are they lacking B vitamins because they're lacking gut flora? Many things that people are taking today are killing off the gut flora. Antibiotics. Okay, let me just master this. Here we go. Antibiotics, yes, they kill the good and the bad alike. One writer said, when a person takes an antibiotic, it's like they're dropping an atomic bomb in the gastrointestinal tract. What did the atomic bomb do? It killed the good and the bad alike. I'm not against antibiotics, but I believe most people should have about 2 courses in their lifetime. How many people are having 2 a year? I raised all my children without antibiotics and they're all still alive.
Let me share a harsh truth. Your chronic bloating may be the result of antibiotics destroying your gut. Every time you pop one, it's like dropping an atomic bomb in your digestive system, obliterating both good and bad bacteria. These microorganisms, the ones antibiotics kill, are the key to digestion, nutrient absorption, and even protection against pathogens. They produce melatonin for sleep, glutathione to fight inflammation, and help absorb B vitamins. Yet most people mindlessly destroy them, then wonder why their bloating persists. I raised my children without antibiotics, and they thrived.
So if we have low hydrochloric acid, which is also usually results in low intrinsic factor, how can we boost it? Eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen, and supper like a pauper. One lady said, "What do paupers eat?" I said, "Sometimes nothing." Or make breakfast and lunch your main meals, and if you do eat at night, it should be something light that is digested easily. Keep big breaks between meals, ideally about 5 hours between meals. Drink water between meals, not with meals. All that will help to restore the release of good amounts of hydrochloric acid, pepsinogen, and intrinsic factor. But you can also take something to boost it. The juice of a lemon just before the meal will boost the release of hydrochloric acid. Taking a quarter of a cup or a third of a cup of hot ginger tea. Ginger is a sweet bitter, and that can stimulate the release of these digestive enzymes. Also cayenne pepper. Cayenne pepper will wake anything up. So about a third of a teaspoon. If you can't quite handle that, start with a quarter of a teaspoon in about a quarter or a third of a cup of water. Throw that down just before the meal. And if you take that just before the meal, it'll stimulate the release of hydrochloric acid. So there are a few things that you can take to restore hydrochloric acid production. The stomach is an acid environment, and the enzyme that's released to break down protein is pepsin. Pepsin is the enzyme that breaks down protein. That is the only food that is broken down in the stomach, and that's a surprise to many people. It was a surprise to me before I studied the gastrointestinal tract. So 2 things are broken down in the mouth, or the breakdown begins. Only 1 thing is broken down in the stomach, and that is protein. Now, in the mouth, it's an alkaline environment, and the salivary amylase ptyalin starts the starch digestion. When it gets into the stomach, it probably takes about half an hour for the acid to infiltrate, and then the digestion of starch stops. Then we come through this little valve at the bottom of the stomach called the pyloric sphincter. When we wake up in the morning, pyloric sphincter is open. That's why it's a good time to have water, ideally warm water, and it goes straight through and gets absorbed. But when we think, see, smell food, pyloric sphincter shuts, and then you start to eat the food, it starts to come down into the stomach, and pyloric sphincter will not open. It's got sensors. It will not open until the food in the stomach has been broken down to the right state. And then when it senses that, it'll open up. But if someone takes a piece of food mid-morning, say it might be, what do some people take, a sandwich and a cup of tea, or a cake, or maybe they're really healthy and it's an apple and a handful of nuts, whatever it is, when it comes into the stomach, pyloric sphincter shuts the gate. Something's just come in, it's not broken down. And that gate stays shut until the newcomer is broken down, and then pyloric sphincter will open again. And then more food, bit by bit, goes through. And then lunch happens, pyloric sphincter shuts. Shut the gate, something's just come, it's not broken down. And what they have discovered, that sometimes at the end of the day, there's still remnants of breakfast in the stomach. Let me give you an illustration. My husband, he's working in the office as the business manager at our retreat at Misty Mountain. He said to me one day, I had a 4-hour job to do today. He said, it's the end of the day and I still haven't done it. Why? Because he kept getting interrupted. The phone would ring. Someone would knock on the door. So this 4-hour job ended up taking 8 hours. Same with the stomach. It's a 4.5-hour job. Sorry, 3.5 to 4 hour job. But if you keep interrupting, you keep putting something in there, then some of that breakfast can still be in the stomach at the end of the day. That's a bit of a worry in this warm environment, starting to ferment.
Thank you for joining me on this journey to uncover the natural cure for chronic bloating. Remember, your gut has an incredible ability to heal when you give it the right conditions. Start today, nourish it with diverse fibres, protect your microbiome, and let your body thrive. I'd love to hear your thoughts or questions, so leave a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to spread this life-changing knowledge. Together we can empower others to take charge of their health.